We have this poem. Julian will come to you in a minute. We have this poem in Persian. در اندرون من خسته دل ندانم کیست که من خموشم و او در فغان و در غوغاست. I'm going to just borrow her for a moment. It's not really about her. It's about people who are usually very shy, reserved. They don't really say anything in class. And it's not because they have nothing interesting to share or they don't have any interesting questions to ask or they've led a relatively uninteresting life. That there is a good amount of chaos within. در اندرون من خسته دل ندانم کیست. But I've expressed myself plenty of times throughout my life only to realize that all that I share, fall on deaf ears. And despite the loudness of my interior, the chaos of my interior, I'm not quite sure where it comes from. I remain very, very quiet, and people mistake my quietness for being uninteresting or having nothing to say. So, anyone else? Julian? Yenning? Well, yesterday when I went to the house, I looked at the kids and said, okay, let's go have ice cream. Initially they said no, but I forced them. So when we get to the frozen yogurt shop, I said, what do you guys want? They said nothing. So I was forced to take them back home. It's true that we have to stay here till 10:45. I can force questions, I can force some sort of a talk. But it may not interest any of you. You may not desire the things you talk about. And so the effort will be wasted. I'll bore you, you'll bore me. Yeah. So.
How old are you?
7 and 8.
Oh.
Yeah. Get them sick. Have them be in bed. Jameson?
Have kids.
When you want to buy a car, because you're tired of walking perhaps, or you're tired of riding your bicycle around to here and there. Let's just say you go to your mom and you say, Mom, I think I want to buy a car. And she says, well, do you have a job? You say, yeah. Well, how much do you make a month? You say, well, about like $1,000. And she asks, well, what kind of a car do you want to buy? You say, well, I want to buy a Tesla, let's just say. Well, you want to buy a new one or a used one? You say, well, I want to buy a new one, I just don't know if I can afford it, but how about a used one? You say, okay, well, let's go online and check out the prices. It's about $45,000, let's just say. You say, yeah, I want that one. She says, well, how much is your rent? You say about $650 a month. Well, how much utility? $100. How much food? $300. Well, how often do you go out with your buddies? Well, about 2-3 times a week. That's about $200. So you actually have a negative. In other words, you make $1,000, but you spend about 1,200. How the hell are you able to afford a car, any car? And then she crushes your dreams. Not because she's mean-spirited, but she kind of brings your finances, to the foreground and pushes it into your face to help you look at things very, very clearly. And then maybe by the end of the conversation, you'll come to realize that perhaps it's best for you to just continue riding your bicycle for the next few years until you're able to save some money. I doubt very much we approach important things in life in that, matter of fact sort of a way. That you get into a relationship. The truth is, relationships require resources. Parenthood requires resources. Being a father requires resources. And we don't really know what the resources are. You may not like your mom, you may not like your dad, you may not have a community to which you belong. And then you find someone out there, you get married to them, and you like them, rightly so. And there comes a point in the relationship whether the relationship hits this stage of plateau where you're not really in love, but you still enjoy, your companion. It's more of a business transaction. You're very comfortable now. You go to work, you come home, you guys spend some time together, have some food, watch a movie. And there comes a point where she looks at you and she says, Jameson, do you think we should try to have children or have a child? And it happens at a moment where both of you are passionate, exciting, interesting. You haven't had a disagreement or a fight, and so things are not shaky, not chaotic. And let's just say you're in the bedroom, you're intimate, and she looks at you, and she says, I love you, for all the wrong reasons. And you look at her and you say, perhaps obligation, I love you too. And then she says, let's go for it. And it's exciting. It's a new territory, and all new territories, bring about hopes and dreams and fantasies. You say, okay. At the moment you have a child, your life as you knew it just comes to an end. You can no longer hang out with your buddies. Depending on how mindful, aware, and caring you are, you can no longer smoke or drink. You can no longer just invite anyone to your house. You can't just watch, movies that may have images that may be poisonous to your child's psyche. Your wife will be exhausted all the time. She'll be irritable all the time. And whatever money you make just goes down the drain. Children are very, very expensive. And then something awful is going to happen. Let's say you live in a one-bedroom. You work about 40 hours a week. You come home for some rest, but kids don't let you rest. And then you have to be stoic in the sense that you have to know how to control your emotions. These days, no one can. This is a culture where people are just broken the moment they're born. And people are privileged and entitled. You can't look at people the wrong way. You can call them by the wrong pronouns. It doesn't matter what you do. They're just ready to fight you for any stupid little reason. And so children demand so much patience. You really got to be like Job. There are going to be moments as parents you say, I just want to die. I can't do this anymore. You may contemplate divorcing. You may contemplate walking away. You may contemplate even giving your kids up for adoption, all sorts of different things, And then you realize that the one bedroom is not sufficient. Then you look for a two-bedroom, only to realize, well, in Oakland, one bedroom is about $1,500, two bedroom is about $3,000. Well, you're only making $2,000 a month, and you just started going to school. Now you got to drop out. Now you got to have 2, 3, 4 jobs, and you're barely making, ends meet. Then there comes a point where your kids turn to be 5 or 6 or 7, and now you have to decide. And you're a father. And one of the things about fatherhood is that, first of all, you're going to approach this relationship in a very detached way. That's how fathers are. They're usually on the outside, and it takes them a while to kind of get to the inner circle of the relationship. And so there comes a point where you say, okay, do I want to send my kid to a public school or a private school? Now, that depends on how you view Oakland, how you view Oakland public schools, how you view people, how much you care about your child's future, how much you're invested. You know, and it also depends on at what point do you give up. In other words, the first few months when you become a brand new father, you're very careful about your language, what words you can use, the tone of your voice, how you should talk to your wife, for example. Then there comes a point where life just gets immensely frustrating, and you come home, you just don't care because you've been beaten up at Home Depot, at In-N-Out. You know, psychologically speaking, you just come home, your wife says, how you doing? And you say, shut your mouth. You know, and it comes from nowhere. And your wife hasn't done anything. It's just that that's just the way life is. You know, you go to Home Depot or you go to Costco, it's busy, man. You can't find parking. And it makes you angry. It's not because of Donald Trump. You know, society, just the way it's been designed, it frustrates you, angers you, upsets you. And all of us in this class are condemned to some extent by the social forces. And then there comes a point, maybe the second month, maybe the second year, you just no longer care what your kid hears. And you walk around the lake once in a while. Walk around the lake once in a while and, you know, just pay attention to the way that young parents speak to their children. They say all sorts of awful things to their face because, first of all, parenthood is a very frustrating experience. Kids don't listen and you're always exhausted. And then you say to yourself, well, why are people talking to their kids in this particular way? Not knowing the consequences, you know, the long-term impact. And it depends on your social background, on who you are, what you are. There comes a point where you say, I want to send my kid to a private school. But private school is expensive. $50,000, $60,000 a year. And so what do? You send your kid to a public school. And what's in public school? It's nobody's fault, but it's filled with really trash. You know, what kids see at the house, their parents, they take to the classroom. It's not funded well. The classrooms are very much like this. It's all broken. Teachers are exhausted. You have one instructor teaching like 50 kids. You know, so kids feel abandoned at home. They feel abandoned in the classroom. And you're going to have your kid be exposed to all that stuff. Then your kid comes home. You know, they speak bad English. You know, America is not like France. The French protect their language. That's not the way we function here in this country. You know, you look at the dictionary, every year we had about 20 to 50 words. I mean, go back to the dictionaries of, say, 1950s and 60s or 70s or even 80s. Some of the words that people use, especially young people use today, we can't find them. So, there comes a point where you just want to drop off your kid at your parents' house. So you can just rest for a couple of hours. Or you don't have parents. And if you do have parents, you don't like your parents. So you're stuck with the kid. And after a few hours of being nice to your children, for the next 20 hours, the only thing you'll give them is your frustration, your anger, your disgust, your discontent, unhappiness. And that's how it is. You know, when you live in a culture such as this, which is a wing it culture, I'm just going to move out at the age of 18 and do whatever, go wherever. And that's how you're going to treat, parenthood as well, for the most part. You don't intend, but it just happens. So if you want to get into a relationship, it's like buying a car. Look at your finances, your emotions, your history, the way you think, whether you have money, whether you have patience. But that's just you looking at you. The next task is you looking at the person you're interested in. because they have the same stuff. Are they broken? If they're broken, in what ways are you broken? Because, if you only have $1,000 and you want to buy a car and your car is about 500, that's the price of the car. Well, transmission is going to go, brakes are going to go, everything about the car is going to just fall apart. If you want to find a person, a woman or a man, but you don't want to examine, what's going to happen is whatever garbage lives inside them, they're going to dump it on you. And now you got two things to worry about: your own trash and your companion's trash. And God forbid, if you have a good, inspiring moment in the bedroom, you're going to have a child. Or maybe it's just accidental. Now you have two people with a good amount of trash dumping the trash on their child. Well, this is not a good way to start any class. Julian? You flew? Anything? Sorry? Yes. It's best to be a parent very, very late in life. But then what you're lacking is the proper energy. And kids don't listen. No kid ever listens. All parents are condemned to have children who will reject them. I mean, it's really just a New Testament story, the gospel story, that parents, after a while, have a good amount of wisdom. They want to, give that wisdom to their kids, but the kids are not in the proper place, so they get rejected. And eventually all parents find themselves on the cross, being nailed by their kids. And then when the parent dies or suffers from frustration, anger, just walks away, eventually doesn't care. If the parent is lucky, they'll see their kids being successful, prosper, and then the kid will come home, look at the parent and say, "Yeah, you were right, I was wrong, I'm sorry." Most parents are not that fortunate. Yeah. Well, anyone else?
What about that children think who they are, or
I'm sorry?
like think children who accept who they are, like, understanding their parents?
Can children understand their parents and accept who the parents are?
Like at what age?
You are 20? 20? 21. I'm almost 60. How can you understand? Forget me and my history, who I am and what I am. Forget all that stuff. Can you understand anyone who is 60? I mean, that by itself is complicated enough. Forget my history, which is even complicated for me. Forget my culture, which is even more complicated for me. All I'm asking you is, can you understand what happens when someone is approaching 50 or 60 or 70 or 80? Because what happens to some of us, Ms. Charlotte, myself, and Ruben, I mean, the three of us in this class have some age on us, is that as life passes, you begin to see things very, very clearly. You begin to look at people in a very sober way. If when you were young, you would look at them and have a good amount of compassion and forgiveness and all that, you still have them when you get old. But You're much more demanding now, you know. And the other thing is, when you get a little older, you realize that your body gets in the way. You can't walk as fast. You don't have as much patience. You don't have as much stamina. Your mind is running really, really fast, but your body can't keep up. And naturally, your imagination goes back in time. I could do this, and I could do that. And I could be this, and I could be that. But now I can't. And so you kind of look back and you realize all the perhaps things that you should have done, could have done, but you didn't. So there's a good amount of regrets. But it's not regret that's rooted in fantasy. It's regret that's rooted in you being able to see things very, very, very clearly. You know? And that kind of gets you a little angry because you've wasted a good amount of time with like ridiculous people. And then you become angry at yourself for having wasted your time on ridiculous things. But now there isn't much you can do. And then add to it the fact that as you get a little older, you embrace mortality a bit more, in the sense that, you visit Kaiser more, your health begins to fail more, your movement begins to be slower. And then you say, man, I think I'm getting to that stage where I should go to Costco and look for coffins. Sometimes they're on sale. Buy one, get the second one for free. It has Bluetooth and everything, air conditioning. You don't do that when you're 20, but you do that when you're like 60, 70, And I don't know if you're familiar with the expenses. When somebody dies, they can give you a tiny little piece of a property way up on the hill where no car can ever go because it's really, really uphill, right? And they'll sell that tiny little lot to you for about like 6,000 or 7,000. But if you want to buy a ground, 3x6, 4x6, down the hill, it's going to cost you about 30,000. But the coffin, tombstone, all the other nonsense, it's going to cost you about 50, 60,000. You thought life is expensive. So imagine if you were to go home and write an essay. My father is 70. I want to write an essay on old age. Go ahead, give it a shot. And just because you're able to string words together, it doesn't mean that you understand anything. It just means you just write well. There are two different things. First, because, consider this. You guys come to class, and I understand that, many of you are in your 20s, and I'm no longer in the presence of 5, 6-year-olds where they're always engaged and active and innocent and sincere. They're kind of like sheep, whereas you guys are like wolves. We're going to be in this classroom twice a week for about 3 hours. And you would imagine that 3 hours a week for about 16 weeks, that you and I would create some sort of a relationship. It would be intimate. I would care for you. You would care for me. It's a business transaction. You come here because you have to. You need a grade. The emotions that a parent will have for a child is very different than a teacher will have for a kid. Eventually, no matter how passionate you may be about your position, say at the school where you're teaching first graders, they're not your kids. And there comes a point, let's say after 3 hours of working with first graders, you want them to go home. You keep looking at the clock for it to be 3 so they can be dismissed. You want to go home and just, take a nice hot bath and forget the whole thing. When you're a parent, the story is very different. You will have concerns that you never knew you would ever have in your life. I mean, right now you may say Oakland is great. People are great. Weed is good. Drinking is good. Porn is good. Walking around the lake is good. You know, just wait till you become a parent. And you'll begin to look at society, your space, very, very differently. You know, you will begin to redefine your friendships because you don't want trash to come to your house, at least not initially, because you're a brand new father and you want to protect the innocence of your child. Once you become a little bit more casual, then trash starts coming in from everywhere. And you'll either be a parent who will protect your space, you will make sure you have a door, you have a lock, and you have a metal screen, you know, and you have a camera that every time someone wants to be buzzed in, you say, "Who are you? I don't know who you are, get out." Or you'll be one of those people where you've just given up. It's just too much, you know. So, yeah. You know, I'll tell you a little bit about Persians, Iranians. So this is the first generation immigrants. We all came here in the late 1970s, okay? Something you need to know about the Persian culture, which is education for us has always been primary. I don't know why. You know, I don't know why Persians put so much value about being educated. I mean, going to school, getting degrees. I don't mean educated as in like being in life and allowing life to teach you. Just having degrees. I don't know why that's the case, but it's the case. Okay. So, my brother-in-law, for example, when he came here, he had an ice cream truck, and he was making about, this is 1980, and he was in the war with Iraq and Iran in the 1980s, so he saw a lot of things. But he came here, had an ice cream truck in Ohio, I think that's where he was, and he was making about $10,000 a month. Okay. And so his parents came here to visit him, and they saw what he was doing. He said, "Listen, if you wanted to like have a shop, we could buy you a shop back home in Iran. You don't have to be here selling ice cream. If you come back home, we'll open a shop for you, we'll buy you a house, and you can just live there. We sent you to America to be educated." So he became a dentist. Okay? And what I'm trying to say to you is all the Persians that I know, and I know about maybe 2,000, 3,000 of them in Sacramento, about 80% of them are doctors. Now, the interesting part is this. Of the 80% who are doctors, 100% of those people, their children, they're doing their master's or PhD. And the point I'm trying to make is the following. You will impose your past, your history on your kids. In other words, if, for example, you're a gardener and your father has been a gardener, and you're okay with simply being a gardener, there's a good chance that every time you have to go somewhere to do someone's yard, you're going to take your son with you. And eventually they're going to follow in your footsteps, unless you come across someone who has a different social status. And then you get exposed to a different lifestyle, to a different way of thinking. And then every time your son says to you, "I want to come and help you out," you say, "No, you stay in school. You need to be better than I am." Okay. Unless you're exposed to something very, very different, you're going to continue the family tradition.